Okay, 3.2, collect and analyze data. So there are two types of data. Okay, so there's primary data, and that's data that has been generated by the researcher themselves directly from main sources. Okay, an example of this is like if you did a survey or if you did an interview or an experiment. Okay, and I don't mean like you, I mean like whoever the researcher is does it themselves. Okay, so another example is that Sam asks students at his school about the kinds of food that they want offered in the cafeteria and reports findings to the principal. Okay, now secondary data. Secondary data uses existing data collected by somebody else. Okay, a lot of times this is not maybe your peer, but a large government agency or a healthcare institution or some sort of records that were collected. Okay, an example is Josh is doing a project on the number of smokers in Ontario. So what he does is he looks up the statistics on Statistics Canada, right? This is government. Okay, now let's talk about bias. What is a bias? When data is used, bias is an intentional or unintentional distortion of the data collected in a survey. So it's important that surveys be as free of bias as possible. Okay, so we do our best to not incorporate any biases. There's always going to be some bias, but we try to minimize that. And here's our specific types of biases. Okay, an example, response bias. This occurs when the actual response itself is false or misleading. Okay, so it's all in that title there, response bias. So surveyees may want to give a false answer because they're afraid or embarrassed. An example of this is if a teacher is like, who finished their homework yesterday, put up your hands. Students are more likely to put up their hand and lie than to admit that they didn't do their homework because they're afraid that they're going to get a call home or they're embarrassed that they didn't complete their work. Non-response bias, this says it all in the name. Okay, this is when people do not respond. Okay, so if you think about this name, you're thinking like no response. Okay, when people choose not to respond to a survey. So here are a couple examples. Somebody throws a survey into the recycling bin, or when somebody hangs up the phone on somebody wanting to do a survey, when someone doesn't respond to a follow-up text, like survey text. Okay, all of those are definitely examples where people just don't respond. Okay, and if you think about why this is a bias, it's because it's not going to be representative of like certain people, right? It's not going to be a good balance. Okay, measurement bias. When there is a bias in the way the data is measured. So a really popular one is a loaded question, and another popular one is a leading question. So what a loaded question is, and this is like a subsection under measurement bias. This is a question that loads with like specific wording to persuade the audience to choose a single answer. So an example of this is like, since cars pollute the environment, right? This is completely loaded. If you think loaded with words, okay? Pollute the environment. Should we all convert to electric cars? So if you were going to ask somebody about this, well, like, of course, they're not going to sit there and be like, no, I'd rather pollute the environment, right? Like that would be embarrassing, or that wouldn't be like socially acceptable. So instead, like, if you just ask somebody, should we all convert to electric cars? It's a yes or no. But if you put in that, oh, because they like real cars pollute the environment, say like engine-based cars, gas and oil-based cars pollute the environment, then it's like a huge spin on it, right? It's loaded with those words. Now, a leading question leads the audience to a specific answer. The most common Example of this is multiple choice. What TV genre do you like the most? For A, rom-com, B, sci-fi, C, comedy, D, other. Okay. What ends up happening here is people are lazy. People are most likely going to say A, B, or C, right? They're not going to think for themselves. They're going to likely answer with one of the answers that are presented. Okay, and the last one we're going to be studying is sampling bias. This occurs when the actual sample itself doesn't reflect the characteristics of the population. Okay, so it's not like a well-balanced sample. Okay, and this results from either problems with the sampling technique or problems with the data collection itself. Okay, an example of this is if you sampled professional basketball team in order to state the average height of Americans. Well, that's an issue because they're likely going to be higher. It's not going to be representative of everyone in America. Example 1. In the following examples, number 1, state the type of bias that we're looking at, okay? And then explain why it is a bias and state how the survey question can be presented to eliminate or reduce the bias. Okay, so number 1, a survey question asks, musical training helps develop brain areas involved in language and reasoning. Should the school offer an after-school music program? Okay, so the type of bias here is measurement bias. And this is a loaded question. Right? It's telling people all the good things about musical training. It's like encouraging them and like persuading them to obviously be like, well, yeah, of course, school music program, let's do it. Okay. Number 2, state how the survey can be presented to eliminate bias. Okay. I would say like delete the first sentence. So just state, should the school offer an after school music program? That's it. Okay? Short to the point. Don't give your opinion. Don't give any other information. Ask your question. Oh, this is number 3. I forgot number 2, explain why it's a bias. Let's go. Sorry. And we talked about it. We just didn't write it down. Because it has extra positive. Positive is like a plus sign information to persuade the audience. Okay, which type of juice do you think is the best? A, cranberry juice, B, pomegranate juice, C, prune juice. I don't even know what that is. I just like put it in there. D, other. Okay, so again, this is a measurement bias. But this time, it's not a loaded question, it's a leading question. It leads us to the answers, okay? So it's a bias because it leads us to answer pretty much A, B, or C, okay, instead of thinking. And a way that we can get rid of this bias is to just present an open-ended question. So let's go eliminate options and present an open-ended question. So maybe just what type of juice do you think is the best? That's it, done. Fill in the blank. Okay. Questionnaires left on the table at restaurants to be filled out by customers. Usually the majority of people who fill in the surveys have received poor service, which is usually like a minority of the patrons, okay, or the customers. The majority of the patrons do not fill in the survey as they were either satisfied or couldn't be bothered to complete the survey. So what this is, because people are not doing the survey, it's a non-response bias. They're not responding. Okay, so this is a non-response bias because people, PPL, are not responding. They are choosing not to respond. Okay, so how can we get rid of this bias? So actually, one of the things like a restaurant does is like when you go to pay with your card, and majority of people do pay with card, not cash now, but when you go to pay with card, it'll be like, how's your service today? And then you put in like your your star rating out of 5, and then you get to pay. So you can say like we can, I don't know, require a star rating before payment. And then another thing that they could do to increase the amount of people who actually respond or give away, like they can give away like a free app or a free dessert if you respond. Right? They have those giveaways. Okay, number 4, a group of professional football players are asked if they have ever taken banned performance enhancing substances. Okay, substances. So if these substances are banned, what kind of question is this? Well, I think that this is going to be a response bias, because no matter what the actual answer is, they're going to lie because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to get like ejected from the games or not be allowed to play or be fined money. Okay, so they will all say no / deny using banned substances. As they, like will be afraid of getting in trouble. Okay. So a way that they can get these responses and not get lies is to do an anonymous survey. And that's it. So 5, the members of an elite golf club are asked if they will approve the construction of a subsidized housing complex on the land adjacent to their golf course. So this is going to be a sampling bias. Okay, and the reason this is a sampling bias is the people who are asking, okay, so who they are asking, like they have like I want to call it a stake. They have an investment, not just like a monetary investment like money, but they have like their heart and their soul are in this golf course. They have an investment in the golf course. Okay, and keeping it nice and keeping it the people who they want around. So how can they change the question, or how can they get rid of the sampling bias?